Alright, so now we're recording the rest of the landscape painting assignment we're doing in computer art. And so for the next part we want to again take our selection brush tool, and we are going to paint with the selection brush tool to make the leaves and grass in the scene. So what we want to take is our maple leaf brush, and that is in the default brushes file. And so if you go to the default brushes, you should see the scattered maple leaves if you scroll down a little bit. Now if you hold your mouse over, you'll see about how big the leaves are. This looks pretty good, about 72, 74 for me. And so what we really will just do is kind of paint right around here with the leaf brush, making a little bit of a selection. And what I will do is go ahead and I'm going to fill that with a gradient again. So I'm going to take my gradient tool and pick a new gradient, and go ahead here. I will take yellowish orange, maybe more like a yellow. That should do. Maybe pull this down just a little bit, and then make this color be sort of a orange. And actually what I'm going to do is also add in another, because we'll say this is at the time of year where the leaves are still changing, so maybe there's a bit of green in here as well. And so I'll add kind of a green tone to the end of my gradient here. So there's my gradient. I will also kind of go ahead and I'm going to take the round gradient instead of the linear gradient. So I will actually make kind of like a circular kind of design here. Possibly, let's see how it feels. Okay, so that gives you an idea of kind of how it's showing the leaves changing. I'm going to try and replace that again, maybe coming from this direction. And actually, I'm going to try one more time and go just kind of in the middle. Alright, so you can see how we're kind of getting some oranges in the middle, greens on the edges, and that's really what I was looking to do. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect and see what I have. And for right now, that looks pretty good, although I did realize I did paint this on the wrong layer. So I'm going to back up, and I'm going to back up once more time and create a new layer, and this is going to be just for my leaves. So again, I'm going to fill with that gradient and made it a little more orange this time, and I think I like that better. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to actually paint again with my selection brush and add a few leaves around the bottom of the tree. Now this one ended up a little too high, so I'm going to start trying to paint them down a little lower. See, they scatter kind of randomly, so it's can be tough to get them to place the right way sometimes. And so that should work. And again, I will take my gradient, and I think I will take, since these leaves aren't on the tree anymore, I don't believe they should be green. They're probably just the yellow and orange. So I'm going to take that color off and just have them yellow to orange. And again, going to just click and drag my fill, and it will just fill where I have selected. So I'm going to deselect again, and that looks good for now. I'm also actually going to back up a step. I think I wanted to add a little more texture to this tree. So by holding the window or command key and then clicking on the thumbnail, it's going to give me the selection of the outline of my tree again. And I am going to take my selection brush again, and I'm going to choose a rougher kind of texture to make some texture on my tree. And so what I actually want to take is, let's see, splatter could work. We could go with kind of charcoal-y type texture. Let's see what this does. So if I kind of, I want to subtract from. And I just selected, so I'm going to again window and click on that to make that mark. And actually looking at this again, I don't think that's really quite the texture that I want. But let's see if I go into my brushes again and maybe I find natural brushes. These are more watercolor effects, and I think I'm going to look in pen pressure. I seem to have misplaced. Let's look again and find maybe special effect. No, these are too funky. So I'm going to go back up, look at maybe dry media, and take something again that looks pretty rough. Pastel, this looks like a pretty rough texture here. This actually I think should be the best. And I want to actually kind of subtract from my selection. And I'm just subtracting little bits of my selection to leave behind some of this lighter brown. And then I'm going to actually layer in a darker brown over it. And just single clicking around, and I'm going to actually, I think I already have a darker brown selected, make it a little bit lighter, say OK, take my paint bucket and fill in the rest of this tree. Now when I deselect, you can see what's left behind, and it looks pretty good. I do think I want to go in and maybe clean up some of those shadows that I had done earlier, since I did them a little quick, and think that I could clean them up just a tad. Go over this shadow a little bit here and make those look a little bit nicer, a little less thick and kind of blobby. Okay. I'm also going to maybe erase a little bit of the roots. The roots at the bottom here. I think I want them to come to more of a point. So I'm going to kind of erase these just a tad and make my roots come to a little more of a point at the bottom. And I think that looks a little bit better. Maybe I'll erase a little bit of this one too. Alright. So my tree looks a little bit better. I do want to add in grass as well, so I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to make this my topmost layer, and what I will go to again is our selection brush. Again, go to default brushes at the top here, and if we scroll down a bit, we'll find the grass brush. Now again, let's test, see what our size looks like. That looks pretty good. If we're looking at this as rules of perspective, we would want to consider that the bristles of grass that are closer to us are a little bit larger than those further away. So I will start with kind of a larger grass brush, and again I am on subtract from selection, so I need to go back and just keep this on adding to, and I'm going to make some patches of grass right up front here, overlap my leaves a little bit, and what I'm going to do is then make my brush a bit smaller. That made it a lot smaller, and go behind that layer and kind of add some smaller patches of grass and going behind that. And I will go ahead, choose what color I'd like to fill. I'm going to make this kind of a lighter green tone, and I can take my paint bucket, click anywhere around my selection, and it should fill that in. So if I deselect, it'll show me what I have, and there you have it. You have a bit of some grass in there. Last thing I'm going to add as well is some clouds. And so clouds again, selection brush. I do find that painting with the selection brush is a little bit easier than painting right with the brush tool itself. I'm looking at some airbrush brushes right now because I want a brush that has a bit of a fade to the edges. So here I'm going to take this one, a little airbrush tool, and I'm going to make a couple cloud shapes. We'll put one here. We'll put one behind this tree over here, kind of poking out the side. And again, the rules of perspective tells us things that are closer to the page should be smaller. And so I'm going to make these clouds a little bit smaller than my previous ones, the ones that are lower to my horizon line. Alright, now I will take a whitish color, maybe like a whitish light blue, really light blue, maybe somewhere on the gray to white kind of side. That will work. And I'm going to take my paint bucket. I will fill those. I'm going to take this layer and move it behind my tree though. So it's behind my tree, and I'll go ahead and fill those in. When we deselect, you'll see that the edges have a bit of a feather going on, make them a bit hazy. And there you have it. So that pretty much wraps up your fall landscape. Feel free to add a few more trees, maybe things off in the sky, or take any creative license you'd like with this. Maybe make more hills in the background, layers of hills with different color gradients. Have some fun and use some creativity.